is it true that there was a ceasefire? Like Putin had a press conference where he showed a document that he said was a ceasefire that then the United States apparently sent Boris Johnson over to Russia, Ukraine to basically blow up the agreement. Is that true?
Yes, this is fundamentally correct.
This wasn't a ceasefire. This was a peace deal before the war started, correct?
No, it was after.
Or this is what they claim?
There were rounds of negotiation before the war. Notably, there was a round of diplomacy between Blinken and Lavrov in January, the month before the war, where Blinken said that we cannot compromise on NATO's open door policy. That sort of diplomacy fell apart. But then after the war, there was a meeting of the Russian delegation and Ukrainian delegation in Istanbul under the supervision of Erdogan in Turkey. Naftali Bennett also had a similar process. In both cases, the West rejected a peace deal.
Allegedly. This is Putin we're talking about, right?
Nobody knows. Well, hold on a second. Let me come back to the evidence for it in a second. But what the deal would have provided is that the Russians would move back to pre-war lines if the Ukrainians would agree not to become a member of NATO. However, the Ukrainians could still receive specified security guarantees from the West. That was the deal. Now,
allegedly.
We have now multiple data points. You've got Naftali Bennett saying that he thought a deal was attainable on these lines, but it was rejected by the West. You also have now Putin showing the very document which was signed by the Ukrainian delegation. So this was the document.
He flashed the document, right? Nobody has this document.
It hasn't been released yet. Yes. I hope the Russian government releases it for the purpose of history so we can inspect it. But nobody contests that this document is real. Remember, if he's just making this up, you would think that Erdogan would basically come forward and say, no, this is fake. There's too many people who are in that room who'd be able to say this document is fake. No one has done that. So I think there's every reason to believe this document is real. Now, it is not a final agreement. It appears to be a preliminary agreement or an outline. But the outline is that Russia is saying we will move back to pre-war lines if you agree not to become part of NATO. And that deal was rejected when Boris Johnson flew into Kyiv and basically told the Ukrainians, we do not want to make a deal with Putin. We want to pressure Putin. And the source for that is not the Russians. The source for that is a Ukrainian publication called Ukrainian Pravda, UP. And they ran an article in May of 2022 that I can put on the screen. And it is the source for saying that Boris Johnson came in and told Zelensky, we do not want to make a peace deal. We, the West, are not ready to make a deal with Putin. We want you to fight Putin or pressure Putin. And if you do, we will give you advanced weapon systems. And that is when the deal fell apart. If you look at the timing of it,
this
happened.
None of this has been this has been lightly sourced here. So let's be clear.
No. But you have to consider the source here. This is a pro-Ukrainian publication writing in May of 2022. Now, the tone of the article and what they basically say in this article is that Zelensky accepted Boris Johnson's offer. In other words, he took the gamble. And at this point in time, you got to remember, this is 2 months after the war started. It looked like the Ukrainians were doing well. So UP was essentially praising Zelensky in this article for taking the West up on this deal to pressure Putin rather than make peace. Now, a year later, it looks like this gamble was a disaster.
Yeah.
And so that is the real conclusion here. A deal was available, but the West chose not to take it. By the way, Fiona Hill, who is a Russia hawk, and you could almost put her, I'd say, neocon adjacent, has basically said that this type of deal was available. The West did not want this deal.